I just want to also note that we currently have Jonathan Buckley, who is online, Kate Nicholl, who is online, and Owen Tennyson, who is online today at the meeting. So I just want to move on now to agenda item 4, draft minutes, and they are on page 48 to 57 of the meeting pack. I would just like to ask members, are they content that the draft minutes of the meeting of the 30th of January 2025 are a true reflection of the proceedings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just move on now to item number 5, matters arising. There are no matters arising today, so I'll just move you on there to item number 6. So I'd just like to inform members that this item will be recorded by Hansard, and as part of its consideration of the proposed act, which is the proposal for a regulation as regards the strengthening of the position of farmers in the food supply chain. Just requested initial departmental assessment of the impact, and we have invited officials here to give oral evidence. I would just like to advise members that the initial departmental assessment of impact is on pages 43 to 47 of the meeting pack. So I'd just like to welcome, we have Elaine McCrory. Elaine is Head of Supply Chain in the Transition branch of the department. And we have Samantha Swan, Head of Poultry, Meat, Eggs, Dairy, Hops, Herb, Wines and Spirits Policy branch from the department. So thank you very much, ladies, for coming along today. So I'd just like to ask the officials now if you would like to proceed and brief the committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, folks. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on a proposed EU regulation that seeks to strengthen the position of farmers in the food supply chain. As you said earlier, I'm Elaine McCrory. I'm the Head of Dairy Supply Chain Transition Branch, and my role is to ensure a smooth transition from legacy EU support schemes to new schemes, and to provide input to DEFRA-led reserved policies and legislation to improve fairness in agri-food supply chains. Samantha is Head of Poultry, Meat, Eggs, Dairy, Hops, Hemp, Wines and Spirits Policy, and she's responsible for DERA policy and marketing standards for the produce listed in those areas. As you said, the committee has already received a copy of the DERA impact assessment of the proposed regulation, but it might be helpful if I provide a brief overview. First of all, to start us off. So the proposed regulation was published on the 10th of December 2024. It amends 3 EU Common Agricultural Policy regulations with the stated purpose of strengthening the position of farmers in the food supply chain. This proposal, if adopted, would make amendments to EU regulations numbers 1308/2013, 2021/2115 and 2021/2116. The regulation modifies aspects of a limited number of provisions in the existing regulations, and they seek to strengthen the position of farmers in the agri-food supply chain by simplifying the rules on recognition of producer organisations, reinforcing the rules on contracts between farmers and other actors in the chain, setting out rules on the use of cross-sectoral optional terms for fair, equitable and equivalent terms, as well as for short supply chains, introducing the possibility to grant EU financial support to Member States for measures undertaken by operators in periods of severe market imbalances, and supporting producer organisations implementing operational programmes and improving uptake of sectoral interventions in other sectors. As you'll have seen from the impact assessment, only one aspect of the proposal falls within the scope of Annex 2 of the Windsor Framework, and that is one of the amendments to the EU Common Market Organisation, or CMO, Regulation 1308/2013. The amendment introduces a new subsection 3A, and the heading is Use of Optional Terms for Products in All Sectors listed in Article 1.2, and a new Article 88A, Optional Terms for Commercial Modalities. And this amendment is made to Section 1 of Chapter 1 of Title 2 of Part 2 of the CMO regulation. The amendment seeks to establish minimum requirements for the use of the optional terms fair, equitable and equivalent terms, and short supply chains on the labelling in the presentation, on advertising material or on commercial documents of agricultural products. The products covered by the amendment are listed in Annex A of the impact assessment, and they include things like fruit and vegetables, live trees and plants, milk and milk products, beef and veal, pig meat, sheep meat and goat meat, eggs and poultry meat. The remaining elements of the proposed regulation do not fall within the Windsor framework and would not apply in the UK. Instead, the UK has its own separate legal provision for contracts in the agri-food sector, producer organisations and crisis support, and these can be found in assimilated law and in the Agriculture Act 2020. The proposal for a new Article 88A of the CMO regulation aims to increase the transparency and reliability of the use of the optional terms, to ensure the fair allocation of value added along the food supply chain, prevent the misuse of such terms, and ensure that consumers have reliable information about the fair allocation of value added to farmers and short supply chains. The terms would have a similar purpose to existing value added optional reserve terms that can be used for marketing project features or production process for the products of specific sectors. An example of that is free range for poultry meat. The new terms, however, would apply to a wider range of products in agricultural sectors. Subject to EU adoption and the democratic mechanisms contained within the Windsor framework, the new Article 3A and Article 88A would apply in Northern Ireland due to it being listed at Annex 2 of the Windsor framework. Therefore, it is the Department's assessment that any business that wishes to use the term fair, equitable, or terms equivalent to those, or short supply chain on the labelling, in the presentation of, on advertising material, or on commercial documents of a product in one of the sectors listed in the annex would have to comply with the conditions at Article 88A. Although these rules would apply in Northern Ireland only, businesses in England, Scotland and Wales would also need to comply with the requirements if they chose to market products using these new terms in Northern Ireland and they do not qualify under the Northern Ireland Retail Movement Scheme. This is the first proposed version of this Act, and therefore there are no changes to it thus far. The amendments are at proposal stage and there's no detailed information about the implementation timetables other than the EU proposes to defer the application of the rules on the new terms by 2 years after the entry into force of the regulation, and that's to give market operators time to adapt and to allow the Commission time to assess existing national schemes and practices. Turning to the impacts, as the Chair said earlier, our initial assessment is that it's not likely the proposed amendments would have a significant impact specific to the everyday life of communities in Northern Ireland in a way that is liable to persist. It's not likely that the Replacement Act... Oh, sorry, I've just said that twice. Since these new terms have never been regulated before and in advance of any specific UK stakeholder feedback, it's difficult to assess the potential uptake of such terms or the extent of the likely impact. However, it's not considered likely that the proposal would have a detrimental impact on businesses in Northern Ireland, given the use of the terms would be optional. Paragraphs 3 and 4 of the new Article 88A grant the Commission powers to adopt implementing or delegated acts to specify further conditions under which these terms can be used, or to add terms that are considered equivalent and subject to the Article's conditions. It is the initial view of the Department that any such future acts would be automatically applicable to Northern Ireland under the Windsor framework, and the Department would assess the implications of any such act, including any proposed enforcement or reporting arrangements set out therein when available. In terms of impacts on the internal market, it's not considered likely that the proposed amendment would have a significant impact on UK internal market movements. The existing section of the CMO that will be amended by the proposal is disapplied by Annex 1 of Regulation 2023-1231, and that lays down specific rules in relation to the entry into Northern Ireland from other parts of the UK of consignments of certain retail goods for placing on the market here for the final consumer. That means any qualifying goods would continue to move from Great Britain to Northern Ireland via the NIRMS without having to meet the new requirements. Moreover, in line with the UK Government's commitment to ensuring Northern Ireland traders have unfettered access to the rest of the UK, these measures will not have any impact on the movement of qualifying Northern Ireland goods to Great Britain. Such goods would also continue to benefit from the Market Act's principles set out in the UK Internal Market Act and enjoy unfettered access. No formal consultation has been taking place across the UK at this stage, and the European Commission did not conduct a public consultation nor an impact assessment on the amendments before they published the proposal for the regulation. And the reason they gave for that was they needed to act urgently due to the challenges the sector is facing. The Commission did, however, open an 8-week period of consultation until 10th of March 25 via the Have Your Say portal, and UK stakeholders would be able to respond to that. The Commission also plans to produce a staff working document within 3 months after the adoption of the regulation that will describe the issues addressed, the targeted changes proposed and their likely impact, as well as a summary of stakeholder feedback received. That concludes the presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. I have no questions at this stage, but I'm going to open it to the members. I think Steve.
Yep, thanks very much, Zoom. Thanks very much, Elaine. And Samantha, thanks very much, Zoom, for the presentation. What do we do now?
What do we do now?
Yeah.
Well, the proposal will be considered by the Commission, and it will be discussed, I believe, in a working party.
Well, what's the current
states.
regulations say about whether farmers can define themselves as produce, as fresh, or whatever happens to be?
Well, what do we do with the existing optional terms?
Yeah.
Samantha, would you like to cover that?
So there's no existing optional terms in relation to supply chain fairness at the minute. There's no rules around that at the minute. What we do have is for poultry meat, eggs and olive oil, there's particular sets of rules that has to be applied. So if you want to mark your poultry meat as free range, it has to meet a certain set of requirements and has to adhere to those. For eggs, it's if they're labelled as fresh or very fresh, the eggs have to be on the market within so long after they were laid. So there's rules around that, but in terms of supply chain fairness, there's no optional term rules at the minute.
Okay, thanks. The second one I have as well, sort of the impacts, because it's, we can't say there's any detrimental impacts. Are we saying that because this isn't coming in for 24 months, so therefore there is no impact at the moment? Or is there, because I think one of the things that said here is that any additional changes will come in automatically, because once this is part of the Windsor Framework Agreement, no matter what happens, it changes, and that will be in the process. So when we say there is no detrimental impact, is that referring to the fact that we're not going to have anything for 24 months, or is that referring to the fact that even if there are changes, it's not going to make much difference?
I think it's the latter, because
Okay.
these are optional reserved terms, and we don't know what the uptake would even be of these terms in the first instance. And also anything that moved from GB to Northern Ireland under the retail movement scheme, there'd be no impact on those, and there'd be no impact on Northern Ireland goods moving to GB. So that's the basis of our assessment.
Okay, cheers. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Just move now to David.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to go back to, you've answered probably the first of my question in terms of any current restrictions around the phrases, but in terms of a question asked by my colleague John Buckley in earlier session, how do you see the changes affecting the operation of the Northern Ireland retail movement scheme?
I don't think it will impact it, because the goods can still move from GB to Northern Ireland under the scheme. It doesn't matter. And again, as I said earlier, I'm not really sure. We're not really sure who's even going to use these terms in the first instance. We're not aware of anybody who currently uses them.
Well, not directly around. Do you foresee any future expansion of the terms being used?
It's hard to know. This regulation is at a proposal stage. I did listen into some of the agri-fish discussions on these, and people would like clarity on what these terms mean. So I think they'd want to establish what these mean before they would rush to adopt any other ones. Okay. And the proposal could change as well as it goes through discussion.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, all right. I'll just move now to Peter.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the evidence this morning. Just going to read out a small section from our notes. DAERA notes that the European Commission's consultation on the proposed Act will run until the 10th of March 2025, and states that it will consider any feedback received from UK stakeholders? So, the first question is that I'm assuming that includes Northern Ireland stakeholders feeding into the European Commission's consultation.
Yes, anybody can respond to the
Okay.
Commission's consultation.
That's fine. And secondly, then, in terms of the progress of this, is it DEAR's intention to consult directly with Northern Ireland stakeholders who might be impacted? Will you carry out consultation around that, around these terms?
At this stage, we have no plans to do that. We'll obviously be keeping a close eye on that Have Your Say portal, and I know there's no UK feedback at the minute. In fact, there's very limited feedback at the moment. So I think we'd have to assess what happens in response to the proposal, what the final proposal looks like, and also we probably need to see what happens with those delegated and implementing acts, because if suddenly there seemed to be, I don't know, if there were conditions imposed by those, we'd want to have a look at what impact those would have, and that would probably inform.
Yeah. I mean, would it be fair to say that DEAR's got a watching brief on this as this progresses? Would that be?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. We are just keeping an eye on what's happening to see how the regulation, what the reaction is to it, and how it develops.
Thanks, me, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other members who have any questions. Anyone online? Jonathan, Kate, Owen? Are you okay? Oh, yeah, okay. So thank you. Yeah, so thank you very much, Elaine and Samantha, for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Okay,
Thank you.
Oh no, you're okay, because we're still in public.
Yeah. So members, I'd just like to ask all members, do they wish to monitor the progress of the proposed Replacement Act as it progresses through the EU legislative system? David, you...
Yeah, Chair, I think in any of these things it's common sense just to keep an eye on it. The department's clearly keeping a watching brief on it as well, so there's I don't think it's going to be any sort of work intensive in terms of the committee, so I think it makes sense to monitor.
Just a quick one, sir.
Yes, Steve.
Chair, just the UK explanatory memorandum hasn't arrived yet. Do we have any idea when we're going to get that?
Latest indications about 2 weeks.
Okay. So obviously, that would be interesting to see that. We might just bring that as a paper in front of the committee
Yeah.
when we get it, just so we get a chance to read it.
Consultation is still open too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if a decision, I think everyone is content, is to monitor.
Yep.
I would just like to seek agreement to request that the Department provides a revised assessment of the impact if any changes to the Act are proposed by the Council or the EU or European Parliament, which would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist. That the Department is asked to provide a summary of the responses from relevant stakeholders to the European Commission's consultation. That RAISE is asked to monitor the progress of the proposal and submit quarterly updates to the committee, and that the European Commission's consultation is shared on the committee's social media page. Members should also note that the Democratic Scrutiny Committee can decide to hold an inquiry at any time into any proposed replacement act that it is monitoring. Okay. So I'm just going to move on now to item 7 on the agenda, members. And can I refer members to page 60 to 74 of the meeting pack? I would just like to remind members that the Executive Office provides regular updates on proposed new and replacement EU acts that had started their legislative passage through the Democratic Scrutiny Committee before the Democratic Scrutiny Committee was established. In September 2024, a work planning exercise was carried out, and following that exercise, work commenced on gathering evidence to help inform the committee's future work. So a report on that work can be found on pages 64 to 68 of the meeting pack. So I would just like to ask members, are they content to note the report? Yeah. Thank you, members. I'd just like to refer members to the Secretariat paper at pages 61 to 63 of the meeting pack. The Committee Secretariat has considered the most recent information provided by TEO at pages 69 to 74 of your meeting pack, and other relevant information, including explanatory memoranda, where available. and has identified actions that could be taken to start gathering evidence on some proposed acts that are likely to be notified to the committee when published. It is proposed that departmental assessments of impacts are requested on the 9 proposed acts with a return date of the 4th of April 2025, and they relate to detergents and surfactants, safety of toys, medicinal products for human use, authorisation and supervision of medicinal products for human use, new geromic techniques, EU Customs Code reform, end-of-life vehicles, live transport of animals, and making available on the market of measuring instruments, electrical vehicle supply equipment, compressed gas dispensers, and electricity, gas and thermal energy meters. I'd just like to ask members, are they content that assessments of impact are requested on these proposals? And obviously normal timeframes for return will apply if any of the proposed acts are published before April. It is also proposed that updates are requested from the Cabinet Office on the following EU acts that have already been published, and that's the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, and the EU Deforestation Regulation. So I'm just asking members, are they content to request an update from the Cabinet Office on these acts? Yeah, content, yeah, thank you. So just obviously to advise the members that when the assessments of impact and updates are received and considered, next steps can be considered. I would also just like to inform members that the 2025 Commission Work Programme has been published, and that RAISE has been asked to identify anything in the work programme that could potentially be a new or a replacement act. Yes, Steve?
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Regulation EU 2024-1689, the AI Act. Now, the committee decided not to hold an inquiry, even though sort of evidence was it's going to affect things significantly. Or is it within our varies then, because if it has changed significantly, that we can then decide to have an inquiry?
The committee decided not to conduct an inquiry into a number of the articles which were replacement acts. That's been and gone now. There would be no point in having an inquiry. The remainder, if it ever comes, as an applicability motion, it'll be a new act, and it'll be up to members of the Assembly to vote on whether it should be added to the framework.
Okay. Righty-ho.
We can get an update from Cabinet Office on all of these. It's an update on whether there has been any approach by the EU suggesting that they wish to add it to the framework. So it's just getting an update at this stage. Some of this stuff may never be added to the framework, but it's just for information at this point.
Okay. Righty-ho.
Okay, Steve. So just once again, obviously the 2025 Commission Work Programme has been published, and that RAISE has been asked to identify anything in the work programme that could potentially be a new or replacement act. This information will be provided to the committee for consideration in due course. A link to the Commission Work Programme is included in the Secretariat paper, should members wish to have a look at it in the meantime. So are members content to note?
Agreed.
Okay. So we'll just move on now to item number 8, correspondence. So I just refer you to item 8.1, and that's on pages 76 to 78 of your meeting pack. And it's a response from the Secretary of State regarding the independent review of the Windsor framework. So I'd just like to ask members, as members all content to note?
Just, Chair, through a declaration of interest, I think I've already informed the Chair. I think Lord Murphy's coming to speak to me and members of our party on the 20th of March, I think. But I know from the Lord Murphy's Secretariat that they're planning a whole series of conversations, discussions while they're here. So I don't know. I've raised with the clerk whether they've reached out, but they haven't reached out to the committee yet. But just be aware that that's sort of the 20th of March that they're coming over.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So, members, anything else, or all content to note? Okay, so we'll move on to item 8.2 at pages 79 to 82 of the meeting pack, and it's a response from Nick Thomas Simmons regarding the operation of this committee, engagement on reserved matters, and the provision of explanatory memoranda to the committee. So I'm asking members, are members content to note? Yes, Peter?
Yeah, after you, Peter. You get stuck in first.
Very, very kind, Steve. Just a comment on that that letter from His Majesty's Paymaster General. It's just the last paragraph, really, and it was possibly more a question for the clerk. But Nick has said, I've asked that my officials continue to engage with your committee's clerks on these issues, and that work progresses. As that work progresses, and in light of the points made around timelines to assess whether there's a way to build in more thorough process. I mean, I suppose my question really is, this was can you guys do better, please, in terms of getting this information to us slightly more expeditiously? Have we, since that letter was sent to us on the 6th of February, I mean, has there been engagement from their side, and has that engagement been positive?
Yes, I met with Cabinet Office officials as part of the committee had sort of delegated responsibility for me to do a review of the operations over the week. So basically it was a very positive meeting, and a lot of what was said is actually included in this letter, that Cabinet Office officials are working with departments here to see how they can work more effectively together so that we can get the information, or the committee can get the information that it needs, in particular on those reserved matters. The committee at one point had suggested that the explanatory memoranda received for published acts, that sometimes it just we didn't get it enough time to be able to look at the EM for the proposed act, the EM for the published, so they're looking at ways that they can maybe highlight. Obviously you can't, because these acts change like significantly, and some very, very minor, but any of those significant changes from proposed to published. And it was also stressed that when EMs are provided to us, it is not as simple as perhaps departments here providing that initial assessment of impact. They have to look at a proposal and the overall scheme of how it sort of interacts with the Windsor framework. But they're certainly going to do some work to try and streamline that so we get the information. And the other thing that was raised was clearances from their members, because you could have an act that perhaps cuts across 3 Westminster departments. So 3 ministers have to clear it. So they are. It was a very positive meeting, and certainly work is being done to try to speed up the provision of information to the committee.
100%.
Yeah, sorry, thanks very much.
Steve?
Yeah, Chair, yeah. So I'm probably take a slightly different view on the sort of particular tone from the note that's come from the Minister. It's just in the sort of the paragraph just before that at the end. It says, as such work, the work undertaken is often far more onerous than the early view you may receive in the short-term impact assessments. And, you know, they implies the significant amount of work that's needed to be done to this. Look, we didn't impose the RIC border. The Windsor framework has been put in there. You know, it's not. The problem is we need to be able to do our job and we need to have information. The fact that the government who actually imposed this process in the first place doesn't feel as if it's got enough time or thinks it may be onerous is not the point. We need to have the information available to us that we can make the correct decision. You know, okay, we haven't made very many decisions, but the point of fact is that we need to have that correct information available. And I think just the tone of the letter, I'll make my points clear to Lord Murphy when I see him, and every other government minister that comes through. But to me, the way the tone is written, I think we know it's onerous because, you know, we sit here shuffling through 900 pages of this stuff and reading the European Journal, and we do all that kind of stuff as well. We know it's onerous. We're buying up an enormous amount of our civil services time looking at these things. They need to engage with that process as well. Just pointing out to the fact that it's an onerous process, and that's why they're late. It's not quite acceptable. You know, that's just my perspective.
Your point is noted, Steve.
Yeah.
David?
Yes, Chair. I think so. The points being raised probably feed into, and I'll not go into too much detail on it because you maybe want to pick it up on Chairperson's business, but the meeting that we had with the FSB this week, where it's clear from their point of view that you know, they don't feel necessarily that there's appropriate resource in Whitehall for the job of horizon scanning this stuff and getting the information to those who need to see it in appropriate timeframes. So I think it's not just the committee that has had those concerns. That there's a number of stakeholders have those concerns as well, and I think it is something that the government do need to take heed of. I think in the past such regulations affected the entirety of the UK and would have been very well resourced for good reason. In terms of when we were members of the EU, I think the government needs to take heed in terms of what affects Northern Ireland and have their relevant departments properly resourced to inform us as much as possible with the information that we need in a proper time frame. But I think that just to note that those concerns are not just this committee's, but actually shared by our wide range of stakeholders in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you, David. That's been noted. So, members, yes?
And
Declan?
I'll meet the colleagues halfway on that point. Of course, this is all onerous, but to make the point, this is Brexit. This is the consequence of Brexit, and those who brought the Brexit scenario about are now, along with the rest of us, living with the consequences that flow directly from that catastrophe.
Chair, this has
And
been,
I'm down to that, sure, it's actually not Brexit, it's the result of Northern Ireland not getting the same Brexit as the rest of the United Kingdom.
I rest my case, Chair.
Thank you, Declan.
Could I make a point for the record? I voted to remain.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So can I just ask then, as members content, just to note at this stage the issues that have been raised in, as part then of the Lord Murphy's review? Yeah, okay. So thank you, members. I'll now move to item 8.3. At pages 83 to 88 of the meeting pack is an updated explanatory memorandum on Regulation EU 2025-41 on import, export and transit measures for firearms. At the meeting on the 30th of January, the committee decided not to conduct an inquiry into this act. Are members content that the updated EM is published on the committee's webpage? Content? Yes, thank you. I'm just going to move on now to item 8.4. I'd just like to remind members that an invite was sent via email yesterday regarding the Women's Parliament, which is taking place on Friday, the 20th of February. Committee chairpersons, members and clerks have been invited to attend a roundtable discussion event with the participants. Should anyone wish to attend, you just RSVP the details and they're included in the email. Are members content to note? Yep. Okay, thank you, members. And just now, item 9, chairperson's business. And can I just refer members to pages 90 to 92 of the meeting pack? I'd just like to inform members that both myself and the Deputy Chair met with the newly formed House of Lords in a Scrutiny Committee on the 12th of February as part of an introductory visit to the Assembly. A note of the meeting has been included for your review at page 90 of our pack, and correspondence from the Chairperson of the Lords Committee is at page 91 of the pack. An introductory meeting with the Scrutiny Committee will be arranged as part of the committee's future visit to Westminster. I'd just like to inform members that, as agreed, both myself and the Deputy Chairperson met also with, as David has mentioned earlier, with the Federation of Small Businesses on Tuesday past. Issues discussed included the remit and processes of this committee, including consultation with stakeholders, regulatory divergence and the availability of information on proposals and EU acts which apply here. So a note of the meeting will be included in the next meeting of the pack. So if there's any questions, David, are you...
Just a summary will be coming, but just for members' interest, I guess the one thing that members be aware of, the FSB had sort of written back to say, look, this is not doable in the time frame that we're being asked to do it in terms of providing information to the committee. It's just too large a job. I think one thing worth noting is that they have, after we had that discussion, agreed that, you know, where they can be that sort of gatekeeper to those relationships and field opinions as relevant, they will try to do that. But they just want the committee to understand, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they want the committee to understand that will not be a fulsome sort of survey of members, or they won't have the time scales for that. And I said that these are some of the same frustrations that have come forward from departments, and we've said we understand that the timeframes are difficult for people, but they will nevertheless endeavour where possible to provide us with what assistance they can in terms of reaching out to their members when something relevant comes forward. So.
Hey, David, thank you.
Sorry,
Yes,
declaration of interest. I also met Lord Carlisle that day as well, so just so that's on the record.
Okay. Well, so I'm just going to move on now to item number 10. Any other business? Do members have any other business? Okay. Okay, thank you. So we'll just move on now to item number 11, the date, time and place of our next meeting. I'd just like to inform members that the next meeting of the committee has been scheduled for Thursday, the 6th of March. Okay, members?
Just to note, there were no notifications today, so there's no business then for next week. We'll be in the process of requesting the range of departmental assessments of impacts, so that there's no notifications for next week.
Okay, thank you. So I'd just like just to thank all members, and I'd just like now to adjourn the meeting and ask the committee secretariat to close the meeting.
Committee Room 30, sound.